Welcome to Translate.One-To-Ones, interviews where we pull back the curtain at Translate.One to see what never gets lost in translation. My name is Laura Marquez, Client Solutions and Business Development Manager here at Translate.One, and today I am glad to be joined by Emily Brewer and Saida Antolin, who lead our global production teams. Emily Brewer and Saida Antolin, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being here today, and welcome to our second episode of Translate.One-To-Ones. In a few words, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what you do at Translate.One?
Sure. Thank you, Lauda, for inviting us. I'm really excited to talk with you and Saida about the production side at Translate.One and what we do. My name is Emily. I'm based in Columbia, South Carolina. We've lived here for a couple of years with my family, and I'm the head of production for the Americas side of Translate.One.
Hi, Laura, Emily. It's a pleasure to be here. As you have mentioned, my name is Saida Antolin. I live in Madrid and I'm the head of production of the European operations here at Translate.One.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, both. So, head of production, right? So, our hops, the people that we jump to when we have issues, right? What is something that people would be surprised to learn about what you do here?
I think people would be surprised to learn a lot of things about our job, but one thing that kind of pops out to me is that mostly people would think that we are focused on the throughput and the deadlines. This project is in process. Is it going to be delivered on time? Is it kind of moving through the steps of a given process? And basically kind of keeping projects moving and making sure that nothing slips. But I think what the surprising part would be is that it's a lot closer to maybe systems design and a lot of risk management more than pure operations. So things like how to design pipelines that would still work if you're getting double the volumes overnight. So most of the time, unexpected things are happening constantly, and the systems that you have in place need to be able to handle that. So another example would be how to balance quality, cost, and speed. If you can't maximize all of that, how can we balance those? And I think that would be something that would surprise people about our job.
Right. Absolutely. I think when you talk about system design, risk management, we're getting into something that's more complex, right? I think there are many people still to this day, many clients that kind of see us from a 20th century perspective. You know, they might imagine a huge translation office with rows of cubicles and translators for each language. And in general, like one person and one document. Is that still so? Or what does production actually mean? Or what does a day look like for you?
Most of the steps are not translation related, and every day is different. But what a typical day for our team, what that would look like is maybe 10 brilliant project managers working together. We're talking about different issues that come up on projects, whether it's finding vendors for a project, troubleshooting complex file formats, talking about turnaround times, and then putting that all together. So if each project manager is handling maybe 10 or 15 projects at a time, they're all in different stages of the process. So one day they're contacting 10 different DTP artists to see how we can handle image text and put in voiceover with the engineering team, or they're focused on a last minute high volume project that needs to be split out between many different translators. So every day is different, I would say.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah, but still, like you're just shooting a bunch of stuff at me. Like you're talking PMs, you're talking DTP, you're talking deadlines, localization. Um, if we were to narrow that down, and you were, I don't know, sitting at a coffee house with a friend, and you had to explain your job in one sentence, what would you say that you do?
I would say that I make sure that multilingual content gets produced smoothly from planning to delivery without things breaking.
Lovely, short and sweet, wonderful. um, I think, yeah, when you mentioned that without things breaking, I think the challenge is that things become increasingly more complex the more that you have to control all of these pieces moving, right? I think if we put an example, it can be a bit clearer. Let's say that something that can happen on any given day. A client comes and they say, okay, here we have 80 pages. We need them into 20 languages for next week. You take a look at that situation And what is the first thing that you do with that?
Well, I think this is a bit of a tricky question because there are lots of variables that can have a role in, in planning such a project. But we have to take into account if we have any regulatory constraints, if we are talking about pure translation, if the client wants additional services such as formatting, subtitling, video editing, all these kind of tasks that, as Emily mentioned before, go beyond the translation, the word for word translation. As to give you an idea, realistic idea, if we receive such a project, we normally start with the planning, putting in place a realistic planning together with the customer to accommodate their needs and their timeline. Then it's very, very important that we start assessing the potential risks to the project as soon as possible. We put, a plan in place for mitigating any possible risks. And then obviously we start aligning our resources. So we start contacting our people in order to get the ball rolling, right? And in this context, automated workflows and working with an established and reliable team of people also help PMs handling these kind of projects and also reducing the turnaround time for our clients.
Right. Is there a moment when you take a look at something this big and this complex and you say, okay, well, it's going to go great? Or, oh my God, this is looks tricky.
Well, 80 pages into 20 languages is already, a certain degree of challenging. But I would say that the client's timeline plays a big role in here. So usually we think that translation is like this immediate science that, everybody can get just like with the click of a button, but that's rarely the case. And for a project to go so smoothly, every piece would have to be, every person would need to deliver on time. There would be no delays, no, nothing getting out of the plan. And that's rarely the case, right? So if we have a more generous timeline for the client and a little bit of flexibility in terms of the turnaround time, we can work with the client in order to deliver a set of languages, prioritize certain files over other types of files. And that's how we normally go about these projects. So in general, I would say if the client has a reasonable turnaround time and we are working with a more or less simple workflow, then the project is going to go smooth. Now, if we are talking about rare, exotic language combinations, extra services, and a short turnaround time, that's when the challenges start to appear. And that's when also a project manager can really shine and do their best job.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the project managers really prepare for the best, the ideal cases, but they also prepare for the worst. So we build in fail safes, we analyze the risks, but we really have to account for unexpected emergencies, right? Like tools glitch, but also the human element comes into play. We as internal team members are all living in different places, and so are the project managers. One example that comes to mind is if a hurricane comes through, and this has happened several times. When I was a project manager in Florida in 2017, Hurricane Irma came through, and I did not have power for almost a week. And the same for our main translation team in Dominican Republic, who was working on a huge project at that time. And they, you can do nothing. You have no access to the tools that you need to do your work. So although we had a good plan in place for these projects, unexpected emergencies happen, and the same things happen with the tools every day. I think another example, Saida mentioned maybe more rare language combinations, and Navajo comes to mind for this because Navajo translators are few and far between, and they also tend to live maybe in Navajo Nation on the reservation. So if we have a need for Navajo, it's going to take a lot of steps to even get in touch with the people who are going to do the work, and they may or may not be available. Maybe there's not internet on the reservation, they're coming into town. So maybe this is a project with 2,000 words, but the amount of effort it takes to find that right resource, make sure that they're available to do the work. It could be one day to get this done, or it could be a lot more. And when a client is looking at that saying it's only 2,000 words, it's one target language. But for Navajo, that's going to be a whole different scenario than it would be for the more common languages.
Right. I They say in our industry we don't have fun. We have Navajo translators, we have hurricanes, like the plot thickens. And I think from everything that you've said so far, could we get an idea, like a slight idea of how many moving pieces there are in a multilingual project that you would handle?
In a multilingual project, which I guess giving an example is maybe more helpful, with 20 languages and 10 e-learning courses, which is quite common for our team, there could be 50 or more moving parts when you're talking about a translator and editor for each language. You need a person to do the file preparation for the documents, coordinating the teams to work in batches so that the client isn't waiting until the end of the project. So each of those batches is going to be a separate moving part. Coordinating queries back and forth between the linguist, the project manager, and the client. Troubleshooting files, desktop publishing for images and on-screen text, then a separate team for dubbing and subtitling for those e-learning courses, and then engineering team to put it all back together. There could easily be, 50 or more moving parts for just that single project. Not to mention, of course, quality checks inserted along the way to make sure that each step is handled properly.
Right. For example, when I think about your role, I kind of imagine you like hovering above everything that is going on and, like keeping an eagle eye on all of these moving pieces and processes. Would you identify with that perspective? Do you feel like production is more like supply chain logistics? Is it maybe more like air traffic control or like orchestra conducting even?
It could be all three, all of the above or none of the above. I actually think that it's a really
Right.
great analogy. And keeping an eagle eye on everything is accurate. And also, a lot of times we're in the weeds, right, Saida? Like, we're not always just watching this for above. A lot of times we're getting our hands dirty too. But sometimes it is like logistics. We're setting up complex workflows, processes, have a roadmap for a multi-language project that has many assets and many moving pieces. Other times it could be like air traffic control, where really my job is to oversee the dozens of projects that are happening simultaneously and anticipate the obstacles that could cause a crash. So we're asking project managers questions about different risks that they may or may not have considered, and just kind of from our experience with many other problems that have been managed, how we can avoid those crashes. And then it can also really be like conducting an orchestra. And that's probably when it feels the best, when everything is moving smoothly. So many team members are working together brilliantly. The project managers, the quality team, the product team, technical support, they're all working kind of in harmony. And we're there to guide each movement and piece. And those are the best days, when it just feels like everything is in harmony.
Right. I bet. Just thinking about this complex projects, just out of sheer curiosity, what is the largest multilingual project that you have coordinated?
Well, not me personally working on that project at the moment, but one of our teams is handling a 93 language project with multiple files and very specific variants. So this means, Arabic flavor for different countries around the world. And you can imagine the amount of pieces, moving pieces that have to be coordinated. It's enormous. So in this case, the project managers have laid out, as we said before, a really detailed plan, and they are working in batches. They are working very closely with all the resources and making sure that everything is in place. And that's when, these kind of projects are the type that really put your PM skills to the test. But they are also a big accomplishment when you deliver finally to the client what they requested, that may have seemed impossible from the beginning, and then you make it happen and you have a happy customer on the other end.
Right. That's fantastic. It seems it's wonderful for us to partake in something so big. It feels like a gargantuan effort, a 93 language project. I think if you would ask most people to kind of like sit down and make a list of the languages they know, they would stop at like 30, and we're managing 93.
Indeed.
That is insane. That's wonderful. And I think if we move from a generic example, like that client with 80 pages and 20 languages, if we go to something more specific and more concrete, like MedTech, if we have a project that is ISO 13485 compliant, what changes if a project is for a medical device company?
Well, very simply put, I think compliance becomes king in this kind of projects. So we do work for various medical devices companies that manufacture, all kinds of devices that help save millions of lives each day. But it means that they have to follow a very strict process to get their content out there in order to make sure that everything is safe for the patients, for the doctors, for the end users that are going to be using these materials. And us, as part of the medical devices adjacent industry, we play a vital role in ensuring that our content is also compliant, because our clients need us to be compliant in order for them to stay compliant in the industry, right? So that's why it becomes our top priority over other priorities that we might have in different kinds of projects.
And what does this compliant workflow mean in practice? What does it look like?
For the medical devices, I mean, it depends on the ISO standard that we are following here. But for the medical devices standard, we normally need to apply a specific workflow in our projects. So there are certain steps that have to take place in order for a workflow to be compliant. We also need to ensure that we control the how, when, and by whom each one of the steps is going to be performed. And it's especially important to keep a strict record of everything that happens in our projects. This doesn't mean, obviously, that such controls don't apply to the rest of our operations. But for medical devices compliance, it's especially important that we are able to demonstrate this traceability, because our clients may request proof of that, for instance, in the context of an audit, right? So we need to be audit ready, and that's what becomes our top priority as well when managing these projects.
I think another word that comes up a lot is consistency, right? That need to keep consistency across languages, in particular in healthcare. Why would you say that's important?
Yes, well, as we have mentioned previously, the content that we are translating when working for a medical devices company is high risk because of the final use of that content, right? Like, we want people to be able to use certain machines and to enter the correct values in those machines and to read the values that come out from those machines, because the implications are very high, right? There are people's lives at stake. So consistency is very important, and it would trump maybe local nuances or more creative translations that we could apply maybe to other kinds of contexts, such as a marketing translation, a brochure, or a website, right, where we might have like a more creative license to go about the linguistic aspect. In this case, we need all the languages to be consistent, to transmit the same message across all target audiences, because we want to get the same result in all targets. Right.
I need to tap into the unavoidable question that I will ask you, and every single person partaking in this podcast from here until the very end, which is AI, right? So right now at the moment, where does AI actually help you or benefit you today?
I mean, I think that the obvious answer for our industry is that AI produced translations are improving all the time. We are seeing a huge difference from even a year ago, and better results for more rare language combinations. And that, I think, is pretty clear within our industry and just around the world. People are seeing those results. For my job in particular, I use AI to troubleshoot technical issues, which before was very difficult for us to do. AI has made that a lot easier. It helps me adjust messaging to stakeholders, and it also helps me brainstorm new processes and solutions for new files, complex projects. Kind of gives us another tool in our wheelhouse to go to, without involving a bunch of other team members, which was really not possible even a year or so ago.
So in my case, a little bit the same. I would say also that on our role as head of production, we also have to handle quite a lot of data every month and every quarter for reporting purposes. So this is also an area where AI becomes very useful, because at the moment we have several tools with data being presented in different ways, and sometimes like massive Excel files, spreadsheets that you have to read and try to analyze in order to come up with measurable data and useful data. And AI can be also very useful in helping with that. It creates, an output that you can use, and it helps with the filtering and with all the million formulas that sometimes we need to use. So that's also an area where AI is proving very useful.
So yeah, we mostly expedite processes and handle large amounts of data, right? And if you say, okay, where's the part that you still fully rely on humans? You say, I need a person here.
Yeah, I mean, it's still really important. It's vital for humans to be in the loop on most, if not all, most localization projects. There are some exceptions to that with huge amounts of data that just is okay to be processed with raw machine translation. But for the majority of localization projects, it's still vital for a human to be part of that process. We use AI tools for various aspects at different parts of the production, including AI voiceover, AI translations used as the first pass to then be edited by humans. That's part of the standard workflow nowadays. And it's also embedded in most of our tools, but we rely on humans for the cultural nuance, keeping translations in the brand voice of clients. That has become one of the biggest asks in probably the last year, is that we have clients who do not want a generic AI voice. So even though it's part of the process, they want a human to fine tune, speak their language, hear their voice that may be very different from company to company, or how they're speaking to their employees, how they're speaking to their customers. And that is really important for a human to be a part of. As well as managing projects, because as we use AI in more parts of the process, it becomes more complex. There are more opportunities for breakdowns, and there needs to be a human in the loop, of a very good, very experienced project manager to analyze those risks, use AI where it makes sense, inform and educate clients, work with them on what that looks like for their particular situations, and then put it into practice.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with
Mhm.
Emily here. And also, another area where we still rely on humans is, as we discussed previously, in highly regulated industries or context. Just because the stakes are too high to have AI missing anything or making a mistake. So this is where the human element, particularly on the QA checks, right, on the quality controls, are vital.
If we think of, I'm just like taking a mental note of everything that you've told me so far, vendor allocation, making sure the localization process goes smoothly, QA, DTP, whether it's ISO compliant, whether AI is needed. It's such a thorough process, such a complex thing that, I cannot even grasp it myself, and I work with you, So I feel that most people on the outside would not really have a clear idea of what goes on. Do you feel that there are things that clients underestimate a lot?
Sure, yes. And I think that one big thing that clients consistently underestimate is how much context matters. I think when in the day that you can pop anything into Google Translate, and lots of time, almost all the time, you're going to get a fluent, readable response. And so it seems more like math and science than translation really is. And so context is important as it ever has been. It's really tempting to treat localization as straightforward word for word task. The client sends us strings, they get translated, but in reality, translators need a lot of surrounding information in order to do their best work. So, where does this text appear? Is it a button? Is it an error message? Is this on a marketing page? Who is the audience? What tone should it have? What's the broader product or brand voice? Those are all decisions that a translator is making all the time. And the more information that the client is providing ahead of time, less assumptions are being made, less opportunity that the end client is going to get this back and say, this isn't what I had in mind at all, because translation is not a science and two people can say something very differently. Really, the irony here is that adding context up front is one of the cheapest ways to improve quality and speed. if a client is sending us a few screenshots to go along with this list of software strings, it can really come together for the linguist, for the quality control processes, and the outcome is much better.
Yeah.
Right, right. Who would have thought, right? Because sometimes they feel like, why should I send you this? And you're like, it's fantastic and it's so incredibly important, could even be the cornerstone of the project. So if we think about this, let's say the big picture, right? We've spoken about risk management, system creation, we've discussed AI, we've discussed this the importance that context has, the timelines that the clients give us, how much time we have to make all of this happen. If a client was thinking about launching something globally, a campaign or a catalog or whatever it is, what is the one piece of advice that you would tell them beforehand?
I think being clear about the client's goals and priorities for that global client is probably the biggest piece of advice that I would have. We can pretty much, there are basically as many service levels, workflows that there are companies, and we can tailor our processes and service levels to what they need. So if we have a clear picture of the goals, the priorities, all of that to begin with, then we can create a tailored approach to their content. We don't have a one size fits most approach. They don't need to fit into certain buckets. It's more about the initial discussion about where they want to go with this, and then we can help.
Absolutely. I think if you are a company that's considering launching globally, this is precisely why production matters. And I really liked that last sentence that you said, that we don't have a one size fits most or fits all approach. And I think in particular, us as Translate One is there. That is where we add the most value. I think that is what differentiates us from a generic vendor, an LSP that you can reach out to at any moment. And we kind of take on that role of a consultant, a people that you can ask for help and that can advise you on the best way to move forward in order to achieve your goals in the smoothest way possible, right? I think that's where we want to be. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Emily Brewer and Saida Antolin, for your time today. Thank you for everything that you do and for producing the magic at Translate One.
Thanks so
Thank you
much,
so much,
Laura.
Laura, for your time. It was a pleasure.